Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you. On behalf of the Kansas Corporation Commission, I want to welcome you tonight to our public hearing and thank you for attending. My name is Susan Duffy and I serve as the chair of the Kansas Corporation Commission. I am joined by my colleagues, Andrew French and Dwight Keene. At this time, Andrew, would you like to, Commissioner French, make a comment?
Well, I don't have any specific comments other than to say welcome, and I'm looking forward to hearing all the public comments tonight. This is an important part of our process for these types of proceedings, and the commission often takes comments into account in its review of the case. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing everybody's comments.
Thank you. And Commissioner Keene.
Yes, thank you very much. Our thanks to you for being here. We appreciate you taking time from your schedule to come to this event, to inform yourselves and to inform us by telling us what's on your minds. This is very important to us. This is a critical facet of the rate-making process. It's the first step, basically, in what will ultimately culminate in an evidentiary hearing that's presently scheduled for early October. So anyway, we look forward to hearing your comments. We hope you can be candid with us, and we'll certainly be receptive to those comments. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, commissioners. Now our safety message to all of you. In the event of severe weather, and it does not look like it, the facility does have a basement. You exit the room here, turn left, and follow the exit signs, and you will be directed where to go. If you are seated in the overflow room, proceed through the back of the room, through the right exit door, turn left. Yeah, lots of turn right, left, but we'll have staff there to direct you. In the case of a fire, everybody exit this way to outside. Okay, thank you. All right. To make participation in the hearing as convenient as possible for Evergy customers across the state, we have scheduled 3 public hearings. Tonight's hearing is the first. Additional hearings will be held in Overland Park this Thursday and in Wichita on June 27th. For those unable to join us in person, each hearing is being broadcast live on YouTube and will be recorded for later viewing. In addition, remote participation via Zoom with advanced registration was available for those wishing to make a comment or ask a question. So that's why we have all these
strong
vision screens on, so that the Zoom participants can see what's happening, because they'll be participating as well. It's our new normal here for a public hearing to have you all in person and folks via Zoom. I will now call to order the public hearing in docket number 23 EKCE 775 RTS. This docket was initiated by Evergy to request approval to increase its rates. Tonight's hearing will operate in 2 parts. Part 1 will be an information. During this portion of the hearings, all 3 of us commissioners will recess to another room.
I support school.
The Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board, or CURB, and commission staff to make brief presentations. Following the presentations, there will be an opportunity for you all to ask questions. After the question and answer session in part 1, there'll be a short break and we will come and rejoin the meeting. In part 2, the commission will hear your comments. All comments made will be part of the official record in the docket. The legislature has charged the commission with the responsibility of protecting the rights of all interested parties, including those of the general public. We want to hear your comments. They are important to us, and that's why we are here tonight. If you plan to address the commission with comments in part 2, please complete the sign-in sheet located right outside the door. We still have public affairs staff out there. They'll get your signature and your name and sign up. If you're participating by Zoom, you'll be provided with instructions at the start of the comment section. So right now, we're going to recess, and I'm going to be turning the hearing over to the Commission's General Counsel and Pre-Hearing Officer in this docket, Mr. Brian Fedotin. He will moderate part 1 of tonight's agenda, and we will see you in part 2. So thank you again, and we will return.
Thank you, Chair Duffy. Good evening. I'm Brian Fedotin, the Commission's General Counsel and the presiding officer in this docket. As you just heard, we're going to begin part 1 with a brief presentation, first by Evergy, then by the Citizen Utility Ratepayer Board, commonly known as CURB, and then the Commission staff. And afterwards, you will all be given an opportunity to ask questions. But for now, we'll begin with the presentations. And we'll begin with Evergy. And so I'd like to introduce Mr. Darren Ives, Vice President for Regulatory Affairs for Evergy. Mr. Ives.
Hello and good evening. As Mr. Fedotin mentioned, my name is Darren Ives. And I'm going to be providing some of the details of our rate review here tonight on behalf of Evergy. In addition to me tonight, we have a number of Evergy representatives here that can help answer specific questions that you may have regarding current projects or individual account specifics, including a couple of customer service representatives that are located at a table just outside this room. They have the ability to directly access customer account information should anybody here tonight want to work through a specific account issue. Thanks for being here this evening and engaging in this stage of the state's rate review process. Let's see if I can turn this on. All right. So on slide 2 here, this slide represents our current Kansas service territories for Evergy. The green area on the slide represents the Central Territory or the legacy West Star service territory. The blue area near the Kansas City area is the Kansas Metro Territory for Evergy or the legacy KCP&L Kansas service territory. As you may remember, the two companies combined 5 years ago in June of 2018 after lengthy regulatory proceedings, culminating in approval to combine from the KCC and a number of other state and federal regulatory agencies. In receiving the KCC approval, there were a significant number of conditions and commitments that were agreed to by Evergy, including a condition that Evergy would not request a base rate review for 5 years, but would be required to file a base rate review at the completion of that 5 years. This case is that required rate review. During the 5 years since the merger, Evergy has met all of the commitments and conditions from the KCC merger order, and we have presented that evidence in our filing in this case. Importantly, one of the primary benefits of the merger was the ability to consolidate operations and access the benefits of a larger locally owned regulated utility. We've been highly successful in that work, unlocking across Evergy more than $1 billion of accumulated merger cost savings. We have substantially exceeded our 5-year estimated savings of approximately $620 million that we discussed with the KCC and parties in that 28 merger case. We are proud of the work of our employees have done in the first 5 years, and that the combined company that we have created and are pleased that the annualized value of those achieved savings is reflected in this rate review, providing substantial benefits to Kansas customers that would not have been available had we not successfully combined the companies. Our driving focus since the merger has been to provide affordable, reliable, and sustainable service for our Evergy customers. That framework underlies all of our strategic and operating decisions at Evergy. In Kansas, there's been substantial discussion over the last several years regarding Evergy's rates and Kansas's regional rate competitiveness. Slide 3 highlights that since 2017, certainly driven by our merger commitment for no base rate reviews in the first 5 years and our success in achieving merger benefits, our all-in Evergy Kansas residential rates have decreased slightly, while regional rates rose on average almost 12%, and cumulative inflation over that same period was over 20%. These strong results have our Kansas rates now currently placed near the average in regional rate competitiveness. While we are pleased with the progress since 2017, we recognize the pressure faced by our customers in these high inflationary times and know that we must continue to appropriately balance affordability and reliability in providing service to our customers. Turning to the specifics of our rate review request, it is important to remind everybody that while we have combined companies corporately, rates remain different for Evergy Kansas Central and for Evergy Kansas Metro customers. The systems serving our respective Central and Metro customers have been designed and constructed separately over many decades to best serve the needs of our Central and Metro customers. And the characteristics and needs of Central and Metro service territory and customers are and remain different. For example, there are over 2.5 times the number of Central customers as compared to Kansas Metro customers. And as you saw on the earlier slide, the geographic footprint over which we serve Central customers is dramatically larger and more dispersed than that of the Kansas Metro customers, which are generally clustered around the greater Kansas City metro area. On slide 4 here, we provide the Kansas Central request. We're requesting an additional $204 million. An additional 200, can we move that back one slide? We are requesting an additional $204 million of annual recovery for cost to serve Central customers, or an increase of about 9.77%. This is a significant request in Kansas to continue to provide the reliable service needed by our Central customers. When considered over the period since our last rate request, the annual growth rate from this request is well under 2% annually, meaning that while we have requested additional revenues for the costs that we have and are incurring, we have managed these cost increases well below the rate of historical cost inflation. We know that our customers would strongly prefer to not face cost increases. And as I mentioned, we have focused on affordability. We are pleased that this amount was lowered by approximately $90 million in annual cost savings that we have achieved, mostly from the merger efficiencies I discussed, and that we have been able to make substantial system and service improvements, all while managing this request below the level of historical inflation. Slide 5 provides more detail on some of the specifics of Central's request. Working from left to right on the bar chart, the primary driver for the increased request is for the recovery of new infrastructure investments made to improve the resiliency, reliability, and efficiency of our system since we last had a rate review. This amount reflects that we have added almost $500 million of incremental invested assets, as well as Central's share of common assets, mostly information technology assets that have been added and owned by Metro, but are billed to Central based on its usage. The next bar, the change in depreciation rates, reflects the changes in rates to recover investments to match currently estimated lives of the assets that are in service. This is based on a detailed study done by experts in estimating the remaining life of assets. The second component of that depreciation number is new. It's a request for amounts to dismantle primarily fossil generation stations in the future when they are retired. It is best practice to recover the cost to close and remove generating facilities today, recover those costs today from customers that are receiving energy from those facilities rather than from future customers after the facility is closed. The third bar from the left, historical item resolution, is unique to Central and addresses prior decisions and impacts to Central's customers' rates that are being resolved in this case. There are two categories of items here that have historically provided reductions in Central's rates. First, in the 1980s, Central took out corporate-owned life insurance policies on selected employees, and the KCC agreed that for 40 years, there would be a stream of benefits used to reduce customer rates. This was adopted back in the 80s to help offset some of the increased cost that customers were paying from the construction of the Wolf Creek Nuclear Generating Station. Over the 40 years of these life insurance benefits, they will have reduced customer rates in the aggregate by almost $800 million. And in the rates in effect since 2018, they have reduced rates by about $40 million on an annual basis. This 40-year program is expiring in early 2025, and those benefits to rates will no longer be available. This case reflects a reduction in that benefit to phase it out over the next 4 years. The second item that I want to discuss in this section is similar in that Central's rates set in 2018 reflect reductions to customers' rates for multi-year contracts to sell power from Central Generation Supply to municipals and cooperatives. Those contracts have also expired, and the rate credits from those contracts are no longer available to lower customer rates. Lastly, in the green bar, as I've already discussed, there are almost $90 million of annual cost savings that we have achieved, which is helping to offset almost 25% of the incremental cost to serve Central's customers since the last time rates were set. Starting at slide 6, we provide the requests and the details for the Kansas Metro rate review. I don't plan to spend a lot of time on that here tonight unless there are questions, as Topeka is resoundingly in the middle of the Central Service Territory. In summary, though, the Metro request is for an additional $14 million of annual recovery for costs to serve Metro customers, or an increase of about 0.4%. As I noted in our discussion of the Central request, the Metro and Central systems are different and have been built over decades to serve their respective customers. Additionally, I would note the Metro request does not have the historical issues to resolve in their proceeding that I just outlined for Central. Slide 7 is the similar detailed presentation for the Metro rate case request. You'll see that it's simpler without the historical issues to resolve, driven primarily by the new infrastructure investment, which reflects that we added almost $200 million of incremental invested assets at Metro, and then is significantly offset to the tune of 61% for the annual savings from the merger efficiencies, similar to what we talked about on the Central side. My last slide, questions about your account. As I mentioned, we have folks here today, both in the room and customer representatives outside, that could answer specific questions that you might have on your account or projects that you're working with Evergy on. Otherwise, we have our contact information, our connect locations that you can show up at or contact virtually. And then finally, we have a long online account process that you can sign up for. So again, I just want to I appreciate everybody being here tonight, and we'll talk to you in the question and answer section. I think I'm going to turn it over to David Nickel with the Citizens Utility Repair Board.
I don't see that on my screen. Thank you. I am David Nickel. I'm Consumer Counsel for the Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board. CURB represents the residential and small commercial ratepayers in this rate case. Thank you for attending tonight and expressing your concerns with regard to Evergy's proposed rates. We're your advocate in this matter. Let me tell you a little bit about CURB. CURB was formed. Advance, please. CURB was formed in 1989 by the Kansas Corporation Commission. It was formed to be a division of the KCC to represent residential and small commercial ratepayers solely, as it is impractical for those parties to represent themselves before the KCC individually. In 1991, the Kansas legislature made CURB an independent agency. Presently, it is separate from the KCC, having its own mission, its own personnel, and its own budget. Next slide. CURB is composed of 5 board members. The governor appoints these board members for 4-year staggered terms. These are the present board members of CURB. Next slide. The governor appoints 1 board member from each Kansas congressional district, and 1 board member is appointed to serve at large. Each board member serves voluntarily, dedicating substantial time to studying utility matters on behalf of the citizens in their respective districts. Next slide. In this case, and in other cases, the board members direct the actions of CURB staff. CURB staff currently consists of 8 state employees. There are 3 attorneys, including myself. There are 3 rate analysts and 2 administrative staff. Next slide. CURB's mission is to represent the residential and small commercial ratepayers in Kansas before the KCC, before the Kansas legislature, and before the Kansas appellate courts. CURB also performs assorted miscellaneous functions that are related to our utility function, including public research and utility-related policy research. Next slide. Here's a breakdown of how CURB technical staff spends its time during the last fiscal year ending in June 2022. As you can see, CURB spent the vast majority of its non-administrative time in KCC cases, which include utility rate cases. CURB's involvement in utility rate cases is the most important thing we do because these rates significantly affect Kansans' quality of life and the productivity of our small businesses. In every rate case, including this one, CURB presents evidence supporting low utility rates. We do our very best in these regards. But CURB's enthusiasm is bounded. Please allow me to explain. Next slide. Kansas statutes govern the regulation of utilities by the KCC. KSA 66101B prescribes the obligations of Evergy as an electric utility doing business in Kansas. It essentially states, Evergy shall furnish reasonable, adequate, and sufficient electric service at just and reasonable rates and conditions. In CURB's testimony in this case, we will present our opinion as to the reasonableness of the rates by which Evergy can provide reliable and safe electric service. Next slide. Indeed, while low rates are really important, reliability is also important. We want our electric service to be continuously on, despite high winds and ice storms throughout Evergy's territory. Regardless of the 110-degree heat or the sub-zero cold, and notwithstanding the highs and lows of customer demand. We acknowledge that this obligation requires investment in electric generation plants, transmission lines, distribution lines, a workforce, and other items of capital and expense. Moreover, we are bound by the constitutional and Kansas statutory mandates that require the KCC to allow Evergy a reasonable opportunity to recover the cost of providing reliable service. All Kansans are bound by these laws. Next, please. Yet in this rate case, as in other rate cases, the ultimate question is what reasonable rates would allow Evergy to provide reliable service that Kansans need. CURB has retained a number of expert consultants to help it analyze that question. In prior rate cases, CURB's experts have posed a number of concerns which generally point to the reasonableness of rates. In most of these past rate cases, the biggest driver of rate increases has been the amount of capital investments and the rate of return on shareholder equity requested by the utility. So in rate cases, CURB usually provides testimony both regarding whether the capital investment in plant and distribution is necessary to provide reliable utility service and regarding the shareholder equity rate, which CURB believes to be the most reasonable. Additionally, CURB's experts generally prefer to see a low customer charge in rate cases because it is consistent with energy conservation and it provides some customers some control over their energy usage, which helps them to lower bills. In this case, however, CURB is still presently reviewing the applications, the testimony, and the data associated with the applications. So at this time, I cannot definitively say what issues CURB will bring up before the commission in this docket. New paragraph, new slide, please. But CURB's perspective in the rate case is only part of the testimony that the KCC must consider. In addition to CURB, several other parties will intervene in this case. Their opinions on rate case issues will likely differ from the perspectives of CURB and Evergy, as well as the perspectives of other interveners. Next slide. This is not only expected, it is desired. The evidence presented by all stakeholders must be considered. Kansas ratepayers are lucky to have a set of commissioners who take into account all of the evidence and very judiciously weigh the same. And the KCC has a very dedicated and intelligent staff who, after taking all the evidence into account, can advise the commission as to an appropriate balance of stakeholder interests. Of course, the KCC staff is merely advisory. The commissioners are free to and should find their own solutions based upon all evidence presented. Next paragraph, next slide. Nonetheless, CURB fully understands that electric rates must remain affordable. Although we are concerned for Kansas ratepayers in general, we are especially concerned about low-income and fixed-income ratepayers. CURB has asked the Kansas legislature to enact legislation to allow all stakeholders to work together to make energy affordable for all. We recognize that high energy burden may mean sacrificing food, medicine, or essential needs to keep warm or cool in extreme weather. In addition, we have supported a set of energy efficiency measures proposed by Evergy to the KCC. In CURB's view, energy efficiency presents a means by which individual ratepayers can lower their energy cost while enjoying a reasonable level of comfort. At the same time, these energy efficiency benefits measures help to lower the cost of energy to all ratepayers. Next slide. In addition to these partial solutions to energy affordability, CURB would call your attention to one particular aspect of this case. Evergy proposes a new slate of voluntary time of use rates, known as TOU rates. These TOU rates are a significant departure from traditional energy pricing. Unlike traditional energy pricing, time of use KWH rates are higher or lower depending upon the time one uses electricity. If structured prudently, TOU rates can allow ratepayers to better control their energy bills while in turn helping to lower energy costs for all ratepayers. The energy rates for TOU off-peak and super off-peak times are substantially lower than peak TOU rates, and for that matter, the proposed energy charge under traditional energy pricing. So some ratepayers may be able to keep their energy costs low by their careful use of electricity and these TOU rates. CURB recognizes that TOU rates may not fit every ratepayer. Each ratepayer must determine for themselves whether or not TOU rates are beneficial. Importantly, Evergy's TOU rates are voluntary. Next slide. I wish to reiterate that CURB will be fully engaged in this rate case to attempt to keep Evergy's rates as low as legally permissible. But even with these efforts, we acknowledge that energy remains unaffordable for some ratepayers. Your testimonies will illuminate. So thank you for attending tonight and expressing those opinions and those concerns. They are important to all of us here. CURB's contact information is shown below. Thank you very much for your attention.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Carly Massentine, and I'm an attorney who works for the Kansas Corporation Commission. I'm here tonight to give a high-level overview of the commission and how it operates, as well as explain how my clients, the staff of the commission, analyze Evergy's rate increase application. For clarity's sake, I do not represent the agency as a whole, nor do I represent the commissioners, but rather I represent technical staff, which is a group of state employees who make up the KCC's analyst and its utilities division. Let's see. Okay, good. The commission is a state agency headed by 3 commissioners. They collectively act as a body in determining the matters that come before them. The current commissioners are Chair Susan Duffy, Commissioner Dwight Keene, and Commissioner Andrew French. The commission has jurisdiction to oversee a number of industries that operate in Kansas, from electric and natural gas to telecommunications to oil to motor carriers. The agency employs a staff of technical professionals who are able to provide guidance and input on the various technical issues that are involved in regulating each of these industries. So administrative hearings at the commission look very similar to a trial that you would see in a regular district court. The commissioners act as judges. They hear and weigh the evidence. They hear testimony from witnesses who appear before them, and they issue orders that ultimately can be appealed into the judicial system. Staff acts as a party to that case. Actually, I think I might have gone too far here. There we go. So staff acts as a party to the case, and they develop and maintain their own positions, recognizing that their duty is owed to the state of Kansas as a whole and to the general public. So up on the screen is a visualization of how this is all set up. At the top are the 3 commissioners, and the parties involved typically include a utility. So here that's the applicant or Evergy, the commission's technical staff, and then numerous interveners who represent a variety of interests, which we will touch on briefly later down the road. But as you can see, all the parties here are separate and distinct parties to the case. And just like a court, it's the various attorneys' job to present their client's case to the commission. So the commission staff, and again, that's who I represent, are dedicated state of Kansas employees that have a tremendous amount of education, including professional knowledge and training in fields such as accounting, economics, engineering, and complex financial analysis. And during proceedings before the commission, staff advocates for the general public. Now, this is just another way of saying that staff's main goal is promoting the public interest of the state of Kansas as a whole. So, for example, as we've touched on, there are many different interests at play in this proceeding. Most of you are here tonight because you are members of the general public who are concerned because any impact on your electric bill is going to affect you. And you've heard just before me from CURB, who represents the interest of residential ratepayers like yourselves, as well as those of small commercial businesses. In addition to the people here tonight from Evergy, Curb, and staff, involved in this docket are large industrial customers, schools, hospitals, large businesses and manufacturing plants, environmental groups, social justice groups, other government entities, and even other utilities that operate in the state. All of these parties in the proceeding have their own interests that they are seeking to promote or preserve through the course of the proceeding. And staff has the ever challenging job of objectively looking at all of the opinions in this case and providing an independent, neutral, and balanced recommendation that furthers the public interest of the state as a whole. Just click through all these here. Now, I'm not going to reiterate all of the details of Evergy's proposal because you've already heard it from them tonight. And most of you are here because you heard about the proposal even before that presentation and you're concerned about it. So I thought it might be helpful to walk back a bit at this juncture and give a bird's eye view of sort of what's happening here. I often have friends and family ask me when they find out what field I'm in, how it's possible that utilities in Kansas are allowed to be monopolies, or some question to that effect. And so I thought it would be a useful venture tonight to take some time and explain the underlying principles that create this unique situation where you do have a fully regulated monopoly. And I know you've heard some of this from Curb in their presentation, but I think it's worthwhile to reiterate. So you can see up here on the screen, I have a definition of something called a natural monopoly. I won't read that off to you guys. I know you can see it up there, but essentially a natural monopoly occurs when there is a situation where no other player in that industry has the ability to enter the market and take care of that service. An electric utility like Evergy is a perfect example of a natural monopoly. Not only is the type of service being provided one that is extremely unique with high startup costs to get into the market, and it makes new market entry difficult, if not impossible. And once an electric grid is in place and it's set up to deliver power to homes in a community, it really makes little sense to develop and operate a secondary grid in the same area. In addition to redundancy of both assets and costs, could lead to technical and operational issues if you've got two operators in the same area. And so to reiterate that idea, there actually is a Kansas law that states there cannot be two electric suppliers in one given area for all of the reasons that are listed on the screen above. And a part of the KCC's function, in addition to doing these rate proceedings, is to classify and map each of those territories and to ensure that any territory overlaps are remediated so that the utilities don't end up in violation of the Retail Electric Suppliers Act. So going further into the policy behind this structure, I wanted to focus on a concept called the regulatory compact. The overarching idea here is twofold. One, electricity is too important of a resource to be left entirely to the competitive and private market. In the modern world, you could make the argument that electricity is our most important resource. You'd be hard pressed to acquire or sustain food, water, or adequate shelter in this society without electricity. Yet private industry, no matter what type of good it's selling, whether that's electricity or otherwise, is about a bottom line. And you can call that what you want, but without a profit margin, there's no reason for any industry to exist ever. And we've seen this happen, not in Kansas, but in other states, scenarios where during extreme events, it's not economic for that utility to go out and buy power because maybe that power is extremely high priced because it's in high demand. And so they don't go out and buy it and the lights don't stay on. And we've seen that be devastating to human life. Now, on the flip side, it also isn't the most efficient thing for a government to try and take on the task of fully providing for the electric grid. I lost my spot there for a second. But basically, it's not efficient to provide for the government to try and provide for the electric grid and all of that entails. That's a highly technical endeavor that requires both expediency and technical proficiency. So in order to achieve both the benefit of efficiency so that the lights stay on and remain on when you need them, and give assurance in public protection, the idea of this regulatory compact came into play throughout the law over the course of time, where utilities are granted an exclusive service area with relative earning stability in exchange for being fully regulated by the state. So up on the screen are just a few very high-level sources of law behind the idea of the regulatory compact. Kansas statutes require Evergy to provide efficient and sufficient service at just and reasonable rates. And the Kansas Supreme Court weighed in and added some dimension to what just and reasonable means. And that standard is what guides the commissioners in proceedings like these. So we look to determine that all of the interests at play are balanced, but particularly we're looking to try and find a balance between Evergy's shareholders and its ratepayers, as well as ratepayers of today and the future. In addition to the law just discussed, there's also actually a constitutional basis for why the utility is allowed to earn a reasonable profit on its investment. The utility, we have to remember, is a private business investing private money to build and maintain the electric grid. Yet its assets are used to provide a necessary public service. So above and beyond the Kansas specific law already discussed in this presentation is the constitutional principle that the utility's property cannot be used for public purposes without just compensation. So to sum it up, as was done by the Kansas Supreme Court in 1999, the KCC is required to balance the public need for adequate, efficient, and reasonable service with the utility's need for sufficient revenue to meet the cost of furnishing that service and to earn a reasonable profit. So before we get into how specifically the KCC goes about finding that proper balance, I wanted to zoom out a bit on the process as a whole. So you've heard tonight from Evergy already, who represents its own interests and that of its shareholders, as well as CURB, who advocates on behalf of residential and small commercial customers. Other parties we kind of touched on, but for example, in the case currently, we have various gas companies operating in the state, as well as a couple of refineries, the United States Department of Defense, the Kansas Chamber and the Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce, the National Resources Defense Council, various large industrial businesses and manufacturing plants, the school district out of Sedgwick County. Those have all been granted intervention, and we still yet have interventions from more entities pending. These parties all review Evergy's application and make recommendations on the appropriate or reasonable rate level and level of return for shareholders, among other things. They are free to make comments on any aspect of Evergy's application that concerns their particular interest group. These parties file testimony in the docket, engage in the data sharing process, and participate in any of the other legal proceeding that takes place in the case. And all of this makes the record of evidence on which the commission makes the ultimate decision about whether Evergy's rates should increase, and if so, by how much. So if you remember back a few slides, one of the prongs of that reasonableness test that the Kansas Supreme Court set forth requires the KCC to analyze and factor in the public interest when ruling on Evergy's application. The public interest means the state of Kansas as a whole, which is represented in pieces by each of those interveners that were discussed in the previous slide. KCC staff, again, is tasked with balancing all of those interests and representing the public generally and thus the state as a whole. So going more in depth into the KCC's role, the commission staff are currently undertaking an independent review of Evergy's proposal. This review includes an in-depth examination of Evergy's finances, which allows staff to evaluate the application for accuracy and for compliance with Kansas law. The investigation also includes identification of any positive or negative impacts on customers, the utility, and the public generally. During this investigation, staff determines which costs the utility is legally allowed to recover in rates, but perhaps more importantly for your purposes tonight, we also look at what costs maybe are not appropriate to recover from customers. Finally, staff also evaluates the structure of the utility's rates to ensure that they are fair and based on the underlying cost to serve that particular rate class. After its investigation is complete, staff will submit written testimony in this docket that indicates its position, and staff will actively participate in the rate case process by advocating for that position throughout. Staff's role, again, is not to help any one party over another, but rather to provide independent assistance to the commissioners in balancing these competing interests and evaluating the total impact of the application on the state of Kansas. So staff's testimony is due August 29th of this year. And if you are interested, you can actually, there's instructions on the screen here, and there will be, these again will be repeated in a later slide. But you can actually go onto the KCC's website, and if you navigate to the commission activity tab, it will take you to a place kind of like almost like a Google search engine where you can type in the docket number, and you can actually, to the extent that you wish, keep up to date with all of the filings in this docket. Additionally, we have many members of technical staff present in the audience tonight, and they will be around after the meeting if you want to have any further conversations. Up on the screen, I have the remaining important deadlines in this docket shown. So for everyone in this audience, the important one to remember is the one that's in red. Public comment period will end at 5 p.m. on September 29th. If you intend to submit a comment in this docket, you must do so before that date. And instructions for how to do so are on this screen, which I will leave up here for a few minutes if anybody wants to write it down. So this contains the information on how you can submit a public comment. The first way you can do so is here tonight in front of the commissioners in person, or you can send your comments to our Public Affairs and Consumer Protection Office, and the various ways to reach them are listed up here. You can do that by mail, by email, or by phone call. And again, as I stated previously, you are more than welcome to follow our proceedings along on the website. So in conclusion, I just wanted to say thank you all for coming out. It really is valuable to have you here and for you to voice your opinion. These comments will get filed in the docket and become part of that record of evidence on which the commissioners will make their decision. So we appreciate your participation and thank you.
Thank you to all of our presenters. We're about to begin the question and period. But please save any comments you have on the proposed rate increase until the commissioners are present. And those comments can be added to the official record in this case. The questions are directed to Evergy staff or Curb just to help you get better informed about the application of the process. To try to accommodate as many questions as we can, we would ask that you limit yourself to asking one question at a time. And hopefully if people have multiple questions, we can circle back to you. For those of you that are participating via Zoom, there is a raise hand feature. Please use that and I will monitor that and we will call on you and unmute your microphone. And we're going to jump back and forth between in-person questions and Zoom questions as necessary. We have a microphone set up in the aisle at the center of the room. So those of you in person that would like to ask questions, please step up to the mic and ask your questions. Please identify yourself and the city you reside in. For anybody that it's physically difficult to get to the mic, please signal us and we'll try to bring a mic to you. Again, thank you. And with that, it looks like we already have our first questioner. So I had to lower the mic too, if it makes you feel better.
Evelyn Davis, I live at Wakarusa and I'm not an Evergy, not served directly by Evergy, but I understand I'm on Free State, the cooperative, so I'll address this to Evergy, I guess. How does this rate increase that you are proposing, how will it affect, because I know we buy a lot of the power from you.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the question. It certainly doesn't have a direct effect on Free State. Much of the cost of power that Free State would buy from us would be dependent on kind of current energy prices. So those move not because of a rate case, but because of what's going on in the market over time. So I think you'll see more impact from higher natural gas prices or movements in the energy market than anything that would result from this case.
Okay, because something was mentioned about the contracts with, I'm not sure who you were referring to when you said certain contracts were going to be in.
Yeah, I mentioned it.
Oh, you did, okay.
Yeah, there were a couple of, longer term wholesale contracts with municipals and co-ops, not Free State.
Not Free State?
Not Free State.
Okay.
That expired.
Okay,
So by and large, many of the municipals and co-ops now participate directly into the regional market rather than doing longer term contracts with utilities like that.
okay, thank you.
Thanks for the question.
My name is Chuck Duncan, citizen. You do supply me with electricity. So I'm old enough to remember when it was just old KPL. So my question is on my bill, and I'm trying to understand where this fits in. You're talking about an average of a $14 increase per month. So that's about $178 a year, give or take, which in my case is like one more month of payments. So is this 14 go to the basic rate? Does it get added on to the energy use, the fuel use, the property tax, the transmission, or the efficiency rate? I mean, where does it fit? And no, please. So I'm here to ask a question. I'm not offering any opinions tonight. I've offered opinions on a lot of things over the last 70 years, but not tonight. And so exactly where does it plug in? Because wherever it plugs in, is there a multiplier effect on as a result of these other line items? And then, of course, whatever plugs in, you put the sales tax on top of that. So in Topeka, that's another 10% in terms of the increase. So it's another $17 or $18. So I'd like to know how that $14 fits in terms of the rate structure and where on my bill. Thank you. Appreciate you being here. I wouldn't want to be sitting where you are.
I appreciate the question. There are a number of line items on the bill for various legislatively allowed charges. That's for sure. But in particular, the components that most likely are going to be affected by this are the basic customer charge and the kilowatt hour basic rate. So not the property tax, not the fuel charges. Those run through separate processes with the KCC. And that was part of the process that staff's attorney talked about in terms of one of the things we'll do besides determining a number is all the parties will also have positions on how that number gets allocated to different customer classes and ultimately to different rate components. And the commission will weigh in on all of that and balance the outcome. But those will be the two primary areas.
Thank you. If we could briefly take a Zoom question and then we'll get back to you. So I, of course, have a name that I'm going to bungle. Amir Nizam Zed. I apologize for that.
Not a problem. I even bungle it and it's my name. You had mentioned, and somebody actually touched on it, that you have some municipality contracts and otherwise that are set to expire. And I'm assuming that these contracts were already in place or were in the works to be in place when you guys merged with Westar. Sorry, my brain just went dead on a Tuesday. So my lead to question is, I'm assuming that part of the rate increase, as you guys explained, were for infrastructure improvement of the antiquated systems and infrastructure, because frankly, it is antiquated. But why hasn't there been any other contracts to be pursued? Because I'm assuming that part of this rate increase is to offset these expiring or already expired contracts that you guys would have brought in revenue.
Yeah, this is Darren with Evergy. That's a great question. I appreciate you asking that. On those wholesale contracts, how those generally work is the retail customers pay for the generation supply that we own. If we have capacity and energy that's available, it's not going to be needed to serve our customers, then historically we had opportunities to go out and do direct contracts with other parties, municipals or co-ops, and sell that power. And if we did, since retail customers were paying for this facilities, the credit for those sales comes back to retail customers. So it lowers the rates that you would otherwise be paying. So a couple things have happened. Two, we continue to have growth in our service territory and additional requirements for our retail customers. So we have less power to go out and contract with the assets that we have. And then two, there's a regional market that's much more advanced today than it was 5, 10 years ago. And many of those parties now procure their energy and their supply directly from the market instead of entering contracts with a utility like Evergy. So the flip side of that is true. Now we sell power directly into the market if it's excess, and anything above the retail customer share comes back from the regional market as a credit. So there could still be some credit for that energy that's no longer being sold on those contracts. It'll just come from a different form. And back to our question, it'll come through the fuel line item that was mentioned by the earlier person. Thanks for the question.
I'm Kate Hamilton. I'm a resident of Topeka, and I've been buying electricity for over 25 years from Evergy, Westar, KPL.
Thank you.
Yeah. And originally I was not upset about the rate increase when I heard about it. I figured, gosh, you guys were talking about closing the coal plant in Douglas County. You were talking about what you were going to do with increasing solar power and renewable sources for energy. All of that's going to take major investment for the transition. And then I found out that you're backing away from all those commitments, that you're continuing to use the coal plant indefinitely and adding natural gas plants, that you are discouraging and opposing solar energy being used by individual residents and businesses. Now, as we look at transitioning to the future, obviously, I'm not someone that needs to look decades ahead. But you guys, being an organization that surely will be around for a while, need to be investing in the future. Can you tell me how these dollars are going to help us transition to sustainable energy?
Yeah, thanks for the comment and the question. So a couple things real quick. The dollars that we asked for and the way the regulatory process works in Kansas is we ask for dollars that we either have already spent or we are currently spending. So we always collect historical dollars and we try and adjust to make that fit in the future. So it's not like we're just pulling a windfall out of this proceeding to go make the next investment. We're recovering dollars that we've put into the system already. But more importantly to your question, we do have a long-term plan process. It's called an integrated resource plan. We work on it pretty much year round every year, but once a year we provide it to the KCC staff and stakeholders in Kansas, and it evaluates all of the things that you suggested. You know, what is the right mix of resources to serve customers that can deliver it at the lowest possible cost? You know, how do we transition to the extent that we need to make changes in our generation supply in response to federal regulations in fossil facilities, and all those are out there. We have made a couple recent changes in our integrated resource plan. You mentioned the potential need for natural gas. That in large part is due to some delays in the ability to put in utility scale solar and wind for supply chain reasons and just demand that's going on in the country right now, as well as we are seeing some significant growth in the Kansas area. You guys have probably read about the Panasonic plant that is coming in Kansas and going to make batteries. That's a large customer with a large new load that we'll have to serve. It'll bring new residents to Kansas that'll need to be served. So we have to balance that reliability and that need to serve with that transition.
Okay, we'll take a live question, then we'll go back to Zoom and another live question. So just so everybody can be prepared. So please go ahead.
My question is going to have a lot of overlap with the young lady that went before me. With the context given that Evergy reported 854 million in profits last year off of 5.85 billion in revenue. Revenue meaning you received that money from Kansas taxpayers and Missouri taxpayers. You can reinvest that revenue how you see fit. So as you scale back, just like she said, your renewable energy investments, I'm just trying to find out, when you ask us for more money, when do we get the payout on the back? This seems like a short-term infusion of money or short-term dividends. I mean, your stockholders made a lot of money last night, or sorry, last year. My apologies, my apologies. This seems very short-term when renewable energy investments, I understand there are shortfalls in the supply chain and getting that equipment into Kansas. But scaling back the plans and investments seems short-term when every summer's getting hotter, every winter's getting colder. And as much as this money is going to bolster our infrastructure, it's only going to get worse as time goes if we don't address the problems now.
Yeah, so there is a little bit of overlap there. I think my answer to that would be, we recognize that it's going to take a mix of all solutions to provide supply to customers and provide it reliably and affordably. It's going to take wind resources, it's going to take solar resources, it's going to take some sustainable dispatchable resources that we can call on, like natural gas, when the sun's not shining or the wind's not blowing and those resources aren't available for customers. And we need a balanced mix of all of them. That's what our plan lays out. That's what it identifies. It does identify a trajectory to get to that transition, but we're attempting to do it in enough of a balanced way that we can ensure the reliability aspect for Kansas customers as well.
We'll turn to Zoom and Daniel Warnke. Mr. Warnke,
Yeah.
we can hear you. Please go ahead.
So my question kind of circles back again on the last two, especially the last one where Evergy posted 900 million in profits. So the statute we all saw showed that it has to be reasonable. Does Evergy not feel that that profit margin is reasonable?
So I guess my answer to that, and thanks for the question, is, and staff's attorney mentioned it earlier too, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we are a private organization that goes out and finds the shareholders and acquires the debt to invest in the assets in the state to provide service. We have to be able to pay our shareholders for the use of their funds and to pay our debt providers for the use of their funds. So that's all intertwined in the profit margin. If you look at industry peers, other utilities like us, we are right in the middle of the fairway to the low end of shareholder returns that we've been providing back to our shareholders. So I hope you'll understand that we have an obligation to actually pay for the use of funds so that we can continue to get more funds to invest in the system.
Hi, I'm Jake Mertz, and I have a clarification first on somebody's slide said something about the south, central, and the metro area. Are there 3 different areas, or is it really just 2 areas? Is it just the Kansas City and the central?
Yeah.
Or metro and Kansas City?
Yeah, so it wasn't my slide, but I'll answer that question. I mean, the Legacy Westar area had 2 components, a south and north. That is now Evergy Central.
Okay.
And then we have the metro area in the Kansas City area.
And I guess my other question relates to what is the cost per hour in the peak time between the 2 areas? What's the difference in the charges?
I think currently, we're about and we don't really charge peak time rates.
Right.
Between the 2
I mean,
areas right now.
residential's in peak time,
But
so.
the residential rate generally is about 0.5 cent higher in the central area today than in the metro area.
And what will that do when we change the rates?
It'll be a slightly bigger gap. And the reason for that, back to the discussion of my presentation is, these systems have been built over decades. And they were built separately, designed to meet the franchise service territories that were provided by the state to serve. And it has taken different resources and different assets to meet the different areas and customer needs.
I guess my thought is that within 5 years' time, it should be in one accounting system and not multiple accounting systems, which would be a major savings in administration costs.
Yep. We certainly made a lot of progress in the 5 years on getting our accounting systems aligned, getting the rates, and the system will take us a little bit longer.
Well, okay.
Hi, Curtis Brown from Topeka. I've just moved back to Kansas after living in Colorado for 7 years. Part of the reason we moved back is because of the cost. You talk about Excel's rate increases and everything else. What you don't talk about is the differences that Excel does and the services that they provide, both in rebates for solar, for wind power, as well as LED lights and purchases at the local stores. Here we're seeing an increase and a comparison that you want to be within the industry lead, comparable, but you don't offer those same services. That's my comment. My question is, I've been going through your filings out of 369 pages. I can't find a breakdown for where each of those that increase is going to go. That question was asked earlier. Who said it's online? I've been online for 2-3 days now trying to dig through it, going through not just the Kansas ones, but the SEC filings. Do you have a link to your breakdown instead of saying just $1 billion here and 7 million here in savings? I can't find the increases. It seems to be buried and hidden. I don't know why.
Well, there are a lot of schedules that break down the details because the financial records of a public utility are pretty complicated.
No, I understand. Do you have an executive summary for ratepayers that we can see where that is, or at least page numbers where we can follow that increase? Because we're seeing a substantial increase with nothing here and what you're asking for being hidden.
Well, I appreciate the comment. I don't think there's.
No, that's a
anything-
question. Do you have an
Yeah, we're
address
gonna-
to where we can see that?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that's going to be that directly identifiable. We certainly have a lot of detail in my testimony in the case, for example, that talks about the increase.
So we
and
just
a
have
number
to
of
trust your word. Is that right?
No, there's plenty of information.
The
for
information
stakeholders
is
to look at
there, but you're just saying I can't find it, or that you have hidden it.
There's nothing hidden. I don't know how to answer it.
Sir, I want to be sure everybody gets an opportunity to ask.
No, I'm.
But so please, if you want to get back in line after this lady or somebody else, but thank you.
I'm Chris Huntsman from Topeka, and I just had this thought come to my brain during our conversation here. And if I'm going to invest money in, let's say, a CD at a bank, I get a percent, an APR rate of return. So what rate of return did your stockholders get on their buying stocks? I believe that's on their yearly statement. You know, like at 10, is it 10%? Like Capers gets 7.5% return on Capers money.
The stocks for a publicly traded utility don't get a stated return. I mean, they're just subject to market demand and supply. Our shareholder returns, I don't have the number on me. We might be able to get it to you after the meeting, but they have lagged our industry over recent years, partly because we've had lower returns in Kansas over the last 5 years than we were authorized to have.
But for the average consumer here in the room, like a CD brings a certain percent, stock in Hershey's brings a certain percent, and you don't have that for public utilities? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, public utilities get a certain stated level of cash dividend, but then the market return on their stock moves with the market. There's not a stated rate like a bond or something that they get. So it just depends on how the utility performs compared to others.
So can you ballpark it?
I don't want to cut you off, but we do have a line of questioners and we're trying to cover,
you.
I'm sorry, but we're trying to cover as many people in a short period of time. Please.
I'm Roger Hunley. I've been an employee of Kansas Gas or KP&L for years. You're telling us about the Wolf Creek plant, and you said that the insurance, you had insurance on the specific employees or something like that. Kansas KP&L area, the northern and southern, was never supposed to be anything introduced with the Wolf Creek plant. Why are we picking that up now?
So over about a 20-year period post the KPL and KGS transaction, there were efforts by all the parties in the state, including the KCC, to get to one combined set of rates for the North and the South. And that occurred about 7 years ago when they ultimately got combined on one rate structure moving forward.
But none of that was supposed to have been through the Wolf Creek plant.
It was all part of that process that took about 20 years for the KCC and stakeholders to work through.
Okay, thank you.
And we're going to take a Zoom caller right now, and then we'll go back to people in line. So thank you. Carol Nagel.
Yes, thank you for taking my question. I'm an investor and I have several properties and know people in the whole area of service. My question is, why is it not more equalized over an X number of years of increase? For instance, you clearly stated that it was a 5-year cap on doing things when the everybody was put into one entity, for lack of technical terms. Why does a cap have to be, 10% for argument's sake this coming year? Why can it not be spread out as the cap was held for that long? So that people on fixed incomes, et cetera, nonprofits will have a better budgeting plan for it.
Yeah, so I appreciate the question. I think that's always a potential for parties to discuss in a proceeding. That would be relatively unusual at this type of request. I think when you look at it across the fact that for 5 years, there wasn't any rate increase, 10% while high is, you spread that out is well under the historical rate of inflation. And the other thing I would point out is we spend a lot of time talking about Evergy's ask in this case. I think if the other parties were to speak to you tonight on their position, they would tell you that they will have a different position than Evergy. So while we were at 10%, they will suggest something different, and that'll be part of the process that will go through in front of the commission for their determination.
And we want to be sure that we have plenty of time for the comment period. So I know we have a few people in line, and we may take a break after that and go into the comment period. But please proceed.
Yeah, Danielle Twimlow, City of Topeka, and a customer. But the profit margin for the first quarter, just to answer that question, was 0.143 billion with a 16.41% year-over-year increase. So for that question, just so you have that. But what I would like to know is, I know at one point, and I'm sure this was all for all of Central, that starting from April of 23 to March of 25, and forgive me, I came in a few minutes late in case these maybe were addressed early on. We were having an increase of $2.82 for a 2-year period of time. But part of what was put into that if there was federal funding that was coming through, that the cost would go back to the customers. So there's going to be a period of time then, if we initiate this increase in December or January, that we're going to be doubling up this increase that already started back in April, if I missed something that funds weren't already given back. And to double back on some of the information before about, looking at other sources, also during this period of time of federal funds that are proposed to come in, the Inflation Reduction Act came out in 2022, really providing incentives to invest in the renewable energy sources over a period of time, not any sort of sudden drastic change, but incentives for state, local, nonprofit entities to begin getting resources and funding in order to start that process. So I'm wondering, like, there's a lot of other potential funding out there from the federal government and other sources. What are we looking at to help reduce our costs?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think I'll start with your question on the $2 charge. That $2 charge, you're right, started in April of 23, and it's a fuel related charge as a result of some of the higher fuel costs that we incurred back actually in 2021 during Winter Storm Uri that customers have started paying for in 2023. It's a separate and distinct set of costs and charges from those that we presented and the parties evaluate in this case. The KCC runs a separate process to evaluate fuel cost and the prudency and sufficiency of those costs. So that's the difference between those two.
So federal funds to reduce those rates haven't come through, which was part of that act, or are those being pursued because there was a specific.
So there are a lot of things going on with the federal with the Storm Uri. You've probably read some articles about the AG's office in Kansas hiring legal firms to evaluate how to pursue costs from parties that profited during that time frame. To my understanding, all those processes are still being undertaken with state AG office and folks pursuing that. So nothing that's come in on that yet. And then on the IRA and the other funds, you're right, there are a number of government funds out there. Many of them, while they've been announced as programs, haven't been identified exactly how the government's going to put that out and which agency is going to do that. So certainly all the parties in the state are evaluating what's going to be available for Kansas and which parties can apply for and could pursue federal funds, in particular for renewable resources. There are tax credits available for renewable resources, which has also created demand across the country that's put more pressure on the ability to get the equipment to put them in. So they're still in our plans. And to the extent that we can undertake and start our projects, we'll be able to participate in those federal tax credits, which will benefit customers when they get developed.
Hi, my name is Ron Rose, and I want to thank you for this meeting tonight. I appreciate you getting together to inform everyone on what's going on. I've been closely following the Topeka Capital Journal, and it's laying out quite well how things are going. And it's got a paragraph here that I find very confusing. It says the company plans to pay out 60 to 70% of its net income in dividends to shareholders, which is generally considered above average, but in line with utility stock dividend payout ratios. 60 to 70%.
60 to 70% of the net income. So after we've covered all the cost and everything to operate the business, the amount that remains for shareholders, 60 to 70% we pay out in cash. That you're right. The last sentence of the Topeka Capital Journal is right. That is in line and in practice with utilities across the country and the folks that we compete for shareholder funds from.
You know, it further says here that the 853 million that I heard once before this evening translated into certain earnings and shares. But 534 million of the 853 million went into cash dividends paid out. Someone just said 66%. And I find it, after reading here in past issues of the Topeka Capital Journal about the big merge down in Denver and the FERC coming in and having a big hubbub and a whole new group of investors coming into the program. And of course, we understand if we look in the dictionary, it defines investors as people that expect to make money on their you know, the money they invest. And it certainly looks like somebody's doing well on their investments. With a 66%, I find it all quite, I'm very concerned. Thank you very much for your
Okay,
time.
thank you. We've got two more questioners in line. We'll take those two questions, and I think then we'll try to take a short break and then bring the commissioners in and go to comments if that's. Yeah, I'm trying to balance. We can have more questions. I thought you guys would prefer making your comments to the commissioners. If you'd rather have questions and less time for the commission, you tell me. I'm trying to balance this. This is so if you could proceed and it would help, ask questions. We've gotten a lot of things that are more comment oriented that's probably better for the commissioners. So a more focused questions, we could get to more questioners. Thank you.
I've been trying to figure out how to frame my question as a question. John Deal, I'm in the Topeka area, a direct Evergy customer. This kind of goes off of a couple of questions that we've had before. But I noticed that, I constantly get emails about energy saving tips and things I can do to save energy. And well, I have children and I don't have fungible funds to spend the money required to enact a lot of these. So basically the short version is I'm screwed. Does Evergy have any plans to assist with this goal of lowering energy usage in a way that is affordable for those of us who work and have children?
Yes, that's a great question, and I don't want to really get into it too far because it's outside the scope of this case that we're talking about today. But
it's not out of the scope of this case.
It is, and I'm going to explain why. We offer in the state of Missouri a set of incentives for participation in energy efficiency programs, so that customers can find ways to manage their usage and do the things you're talking about. We have made on a couple occasions, including we have one pending right now in front of the KCC to offer some of those programs to Kansas customers. The reason I don't want to get into it right now in a detail is because it's awaiting the commission decision. So all the parties have presented and the case is fully in front of the commission awaiting their decision. So I don't want to speculate on what the commission will ultimately decide on the ability to start those programs in Kansas.
And I understand that. I want to state that as far as I'm concerned, it is related because I am seeing or staring down the barrel of a rate increase when I'm already trying to figure out how to cut my costs on this. So therefore it is in fact related. Thank you.
Good evening, Zach Pastora from Linwood, Kansas, Evergy customer. My question might be best directed toward the KCC I'm just curious, do utility impacts to public health and the environment get considered and evaluated in rate changes? Thank you.
Well, good evening. Yeah, good evening, Zach. Good to see you again. Justin Grady with the KCC. I would say that those issues are definitely accounted for in the long-term planning process that Mr. Ives referred to as the integrated resource plan. You know, the effect of the utilities resource decisions in terms of emissions, emission limits, the potential environmental retrofits on the generating resources, the reliability of those resources, the ultimate cost, minimizing the ultimate cost to customers. It's not an easy balancing act, as you're aware. There's a lot of different, you know, it's definitely a multivariate analysis, but that is where those sort of really weighty issues are considered in terms of the utilities resource mix. You know, in a rate case like this, we would look for and attempt to remove from the cost of service any penalties that the company incurred associated with any sort of a violation, if there was one, of an environmental, you know, standard or law. But outside of that, honestly, I can't think of where it would directly affect a rate case.
We'll take a couple more questions. It may cut into the comment period time, but it looks like there's some interesting questions. So please.
Kind of a question and a comment. First place, I appreciate the service that Evergy performs. It's nice to be able to turn that light on. But recently, I was involved with the Evergy acquisitioning more land for another high line across my property. And the people that Evergy sent out to represent them and acquire this land would never put anything in writing. So it forced me to go to eminent domain. And in that process, Evergy dominated the process. And I don't feel I was treated rightly. But also the fact that that line has gone across my property. I've owned it for 50 years. And I've got nothing from that property, but you want to charge me more for being out in the country and supplying electricity to me. Now they're coming in and they're saying we want 1.3 acres more and cut it right diagonally across my property, take out trees, my neighbor's trees almost right through our front yard, my trees. Does Evergy plan on, you know, I don't know, like, am I going to have to pay tax on that money that they're giving me? I don't know. It should be non-taxable because it's damages. And in my feelings, I think if Evergy is charging me more to have that utility, they ought to kick in a little bit every year just for the utility to go across my land. Oh.
So I appreciate you making your comment tonight and I appreciate you bringing that up. I can't speak to your specific question. I'm just not aware, but we'll have somebody from our team try and grab you at the end of the night tonight so we can talk more specifically with you about it.
We seem to be drifting into comments rather than questions. So if you have a question, please ask. Otherwise, we'll take a break and go into the comment period. But let's take one more question and then we'll break to invite the commissioners back in, please.
Thank you. Thank you for all of you guys being here. I'll make one quick comment and then I'll have a question. Yeah, I'm a certified public accountant by trade. I was a CFO for the Falley's Food stores. Anyone remembers the Falley's Food stores in the 90s? We had 38 stores. My comment and the general counsel for the KCC did a good job. Some of the owners of Westar now are large hedge fund guys. Falley's was a 38 store chain located in Topeka, Kansas that was owned by a guy named Ron Burkle, who bought some stores in California, the Ralph's Fred Meyer stores. Of the 38 stores that we had operating, there is 0 left. My concern is this rate increase is part of an overall process. You got new CEO, you got new CFO, you got new people. I hate to see a monopoly being owned by people outside Kansas. I think the cow came out of the door when the KCC allowed the first transaction to be purchased by KCP&L. Insurance Commissioner Kathleen Sebelius said no to Blue Cross Blue Shield. I think it's just being set up to being bought by some East Coast, West Coast, being a monopoly. I hate to see it happen. My question is, you can give no assurances or anything else, but I'd rather see Kansas owners with Kansas ratepayers, with Kansas employees serving Kansas ratepayers. So my question kind of goes toward that effect. I know you can give no assurances or anything else, but it just seems like just getting set up for some sort of sale in my view. So thank you for your time. Thank you for all you guys being here, and thank you for answering questions for people.
Yep. Thank you. And I would just say, and I mentioned it earlier in the meeting, we are a local Kansas utility. Our employees live here. We have a significant number of employees in the Topeka area, Wichita, Kansas City, and locally owned was a big part of the reason why we pursued the transaction with Westar. Because we wanted to retain local control of the utilities here in the state of Kansas.
Right. Thank you. We're going to take a couple-minute break to let people stretch their legs, use the restroom. We'll bring the commissioners in, and then we'll have comments. Thank you.
No. Well, there's probably. I don't know why. You heard me get.
Let me just write this up. Your last name's Hogan. What's your first name?
Robert.
Robert, okay. You're on Highway 40, you say?
No, I said east 40, 847 Southeast Green Road,
Say that one more time.
847 Southeast Green Road.
Okay, now you said that's by Tecumseh.
It's, um, you know where the cellophane plant is?
Yes, right by the
Okay.
power plant there, the old power plant?
Yes,
Yep.
well, the next road east is Green Road,
Okay. I know
and
where
I'm
you're at.
south of the highway.
EKCE 775 RTS. This docket was initiated by Evergy to request approval to increase its rates. Again, my name is Susan Duffy and I'm serving as Chair of the Corporation Commission. My colleagues are Dwight Keene and Andrew French, and we join together in thanking you for attending this evening. This hearing is on the record and the transcript will become an important part of the official docket file. May I have the appearance of counsel, please? Carly? Yes.
On behalf of staff. Oh, for the mic here. On behalf of staff, Carly Massentine.
Does staff have a recommendation regarding notice?
Yes. Staff has examined notice and recommends a finding that notice was proper. KAR 82-1-228 provides the commission can hold public hearings at any place in Kansas the commission may deem appropriate. KSA 77-518 requires the commission to give reasonable notice of the hearing at least 10 days prior to its commencement. On May 18th, the commission issued a procedural schedule in this docket, which established the date, place, and time for 3 public hearings and for a public comment period. On July 5th, Evergy filed its affidavit regarding customer notice, in which it detailed and provided examples of its outreach to customers, which included bill inserts for customers receiving mailed paper statements and email for customers receiving electronic statements. For these reasons, staff recommends a finding that notice was proper.
Very good. May I have appearance of counsel, please, with Evergy?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Glenda Kafer. I'm with the Morris Lang Law Firm in Topeka, Kansas. And I appear on behalf of the applicant Evergy.
Very good. Curb?
Good evening. David W. Nickel and Todd E. Love on behalf of the Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board.
Thank you. Regarding the recommendation regarding notice, are there any objections? Finding no objections, notice is proper and the commission has jurisdiction. Tonight's hearing is an important step in our process and we look forward to hearing your comments. We cannot engage in dialogue with you during the proceeding. However, we may ask questions for clarification. I have a list of folks who have indicated they would like to offer comments. I will call your name and in the order that you appear on the list, and we'll also announce the person speaking afterwards so that you can be prepared to speak. As we are participating via Zoom, please raise your hand, use the raise your hand feature, and we will alternate between our live audience and the Zoom audience as needed. To ensure that everyone who wishes to speak has the opportunity, we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. Also, it's very important, please state your name and your place of residence. Okay, so we're going to begin. And I will start off with Eric Bloom, and behind Eric Bloom is Roger Hundley. If you would, please.
Greetings, I'll get this kicked off. My name is Eric Bloom, Lawrence, Kansas. I actually want to start with a kind of a simple saying that Maya Angelou gets credited. And when someone shows you who they are, you should believe them. That sets down to my point of why I am mostly against a tax rate increase increase in the rate. I've been paying for more than 25 years, residential and commercial rates. I run a business and multiple residential properties. When you date someone, you don't necessarily date them for who they aspire to be, but who they actually have shown you to be in their past. And I've been dating this company for a long time. I'm not sure I'm going to be married to them. Two of my examples of what substantiate what I would say is why I feel like the cart's out of the wagon here. We heard someone mention earlier about an eminent domain case, and it hurts you because you're thinking of a man who owned for 50 years property that he didn't want to sell and had to. And maybe actually because he doesn't have the right lawyers, didn't get the fair rate out of it. I know that story. But I have another story where I have a business and a couple telephone poles run down the easement of it. And I've watched various utilities with their, as Carly mentioned, their fully regulated monopolies come in and come go. And some have done better cleaning up the property when they've left and some have not. And I can tell you that as of last year, I've had a terrible time. And I have a moat around my property right now because of a 60-foot telephone pole that just had to go right next to a water line. I was not given any notice that a crane that can cram a 60-foot telephone pole was coming to my property, but it sure did. It put down its outriggers, put holes in my asphalt, possibly caused a water line break. And Evergy has essentially said, until you can prove we did it, we didn't do it. I don't know how to dig up my entire driveway to prove that my property was damaged by a crane that came onto my private drive. But I can tell you that the months of trying to have the property division of Evergy maybe do the right thing, even though I've really just been asking to do an insurance claim. Mr. Arnold from Evergy wanted to write a report ahead of time that the self-insured company was going to use and probably side with me or probably not side with me. So it's really frustrating that that's an example to show that the company just isn't who it aspires to be. And secondly, I have 11 years of installing solar on properties about every 18 months. And I've watched rule after rule make it harder and less beneficial to become a net energy producer in the state of Kansas. And I just don't do it anymore. It's not worth doing because the rules have squeezed the lemon too tight. And I've run out of time. So I want to say thank you for everything you put together today.
Thank you. Roger Henley, followed by Glenda Dubois.
I'm Roger Hunley, 613 Southeast River Heights Road, Compton, Kansas. As everybody's noticed that Evergy has come to KCC every couple of years to get a rate increase. They come for an extravagant amount of money, and they seem to walk away with about half of what they asked, which is probably what they really came to get. This merger that they went with KCP&L, that's the cost of doing business. That's what doing energy is that's their cost of their self. So it shouldn't be passed on to the rate people. It's we look like we're going to have, next 2 years, they're going to come back for another rate increase. Or that it's going to, can we put a time limit on these people where they can, until they can prove that they need that, they don't get it? I vote down that we don't give it to them at all this time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Glenda, followed by Michael Broche.
Good afternoon, Chair Duffy, and also Commissioner French and Commissioner King. I'm Glenda Du Bois, and I'm the State Director for AARP Kansas. And I'm here tonight on behalf of over 278,000 members across Kansas who would be impacted by a significant rate increase, especially those 50 and older who depend upon the usage of utilities, probably more than some of the others in other age groups. On behalf of those, AARP Kansas urges the commissioner to carefully scrutinize the Evergy's rate proposal to ensure that customers do not pay more than is justified by this particular this evidence in this matter. The utility is requesting a significant increase in what consumers might pay towards Evergy's annual corporate profits and asking that it currently authorize its annual return on common equity be increased significantly from 9.3% to 10.25%. We ask that you treat residential customers more fairly with regard to class allocation and rate design. AARP Kansas is also concerned about the proposal to increase the fixed basic service fee to increase that from the $14.50 to the $16.71. We actually ask that you would also consider that the time of use and the demand rate pilot programs be optional and allow customers to opt out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a copy of this and I can share it with you. if you like.
Yes, if you would. I'm looking for Linda or, okay, very good. Michael, followed by Diane Denham.
Evening commissioners, staff, Curb, and members of the public. I am Michael Brosh, president of Leewood and Evergy customer. And I'm pleased to be here to present some insights into the pending Evergy rate case on behalf of AARP. By way of background, I recently retired after dedicating my entire professional career to utility regulation as an expert witness. I was the president of Utilitech, a small consulting firm in the Kansas City area, after starting my career many years ago on staff of the Missouri PSC. I have an accounting and finance background and have testified in more than 180 formal proceedings and numerous other investigations and regulatory matters in many states, including several proceedings involving Evergy entities in Missouri. I have preliminarily reviewed the Evergy rate filing and testimony of revenue requirement witnesses and have identified several key issues that merit close scrutiny by staff, Curb, and the commission. These issues are outlined in my letter I just provided, and I won't burden the record tonight with those details, but would like to highlight some key concerns in my verbal comments. First, the company's requested increase in return on equity is excessive and should be rejected or greatly reduced, given the very supportive regulatory environment that exists for Evergy in Kansas. Evergy continues to propose ways to shift costs and risks to ratepayers, and each of these proposals should be carefully critiqued. As a matter of policy, a rate case test year balances the good news with the bad. Some costs go up, others go down between test years. If you let the company select only increasing costs or submit only abbreviated rate filings for specific recovery between test years, the resulting single issue or piecemeal rate making will be unfair to customers. After the merger and committed savings, the company should be expected to vigorously pursue new efficiencies and productivity gains and will likely experience customer and sales growth, all of which should be captured by the regulator to offset the higher costs the company prefers to emphasize. Discretionary expenses for image enhancing advertising and marketing activities, executive and management incentive compensation tied to earnings, and other non-essential costs should be discovered and disallowed in rate cases. Weather impacts upon sales are normalized in rate cases and should not be quantified using ancient weather history that ignores recently hotter summer weathers and higher kilowatt hour sales. Please consider these comments as described in more detail in my written submission. I would be pleased to consult with staff or Curb in their efforts to process the Evergy rate case and explore any of the issues I've addressed in my letter. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane, and then we will go to a Zoom participant.
Diane Denham, Rural Private Health. Thank you for allowing me to express my concerns. Just going to read you just a little bit here. Just a headline from Capital Journal, published May 8th of this year. Evergy touts financial earnings to investors while seeking rate hikes from Kansas customers. All right, here's one from WIBW. Evergy to purchase Oklahoma wind farm benefiting Missouri customers. Evergy is in the midst of the purchase of an Oklahoma wind farm for $250 million, which will serve customers in western Missouri. Evergy says on Tuesday, August 9, and that was in 22, that the new partnership with both Scout Clean Energy and A1 Energy will fund the $250 million purchase of the 199 megawatt Persimmon Creek wind farm in western Oklahoma. Evergy noted that the renewable energy from the wind farm will serve customers in the Evergy, Missouri West service area. This service area includes Clinton, St. Joseph, and Chillicothe, Missouri. Now, from the Missouri Public Service Commission, they granted a certificate of convenience and necessity to Evergy, Missouri West to acquire, own, operate, manage, maintain, and control an existing and operational wind generational facility in Oklahoma known as the Persimmon Creek Wind Farm. And here a little farther down, it says Persimmon Creek is expected to serve EMWs, which is the Missouri one in Missouri, and they expect to recover their investment through base rates and maintenance expense as opposed to purchased power costs. All right, so then in our insert that we got with Evergy's bill, it says Evergy Kansas Central has also requested inclusion in rates of the costs to acquire and operate Persimmon Creek Wind Facility on behalf of EKC customers, but it's in Missouri. Okay, so I see three things. The partnership with the Clean Energy and E1 will fund the $250 million purchase of the wind farm. Okay, number two, the Missouri Public Service says that the wind farm expects to recover their investment through the base rates and operations expense. And then the insert that I just read about Kansas Central requested inclusion in rates of the costs to acquire and operate the Persimmon Creek Wind Farm on behalf of Evergy, Kansas Central customers. When did the customers ask to pay for this? We're in Kansas. Why should we pay for Missouri's energy? And then think about this. How is the energy going to go from western Oklahoma to western Missouri? And is it going to be transmission lines? If so, where are they going to be? How are they going to go through Kansas? And whose property are they going to overtake to do that? So just a few things to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
Okay, we're going to take one of our Zoom calls. Amir, welcome back.
Thank you very much for having me. I debated on which section to actually pose this, whether or not with the Evergy panel directly or with everybody together. So earlier on, Evergy was explaining the differences between the cost rate increases from Central and forgive me, the KC metro area. It is a 4.1% difference. And if I understood it right, Central is actually less populated than the KC metro area. Unless I got that mixed up, I do apologize if I did, but there was no clear justification as to the gross disparate rate increases between Central and the KC metro area. And the word flat being introduced multiple times as to flat increase. So yeah, there is no clear justification as to why there is a huge gap. There's no justification as to why clean and clear justification, just the if you want to use the term buzzwords, modernization is a big buzzword. And inflation is another big buzzword nowadays, especially a really sensitive topic. But how much was it? $14.24 for pretty much everybody who is not within Evergy's home corporate area. Seems like preferential treatment than it is to actually serve and to service those outside of the KC Metroplex area. And at 35 seconds, I'm done.
Thank you, Amir. Okay, we'll turn back to folks in the room. We're ready for Joanne Phillips, followed by Robert Troop. Joanne Phillips. Okay, we'll move on to Robert. No, Robert Troop. Yeah, Robert Troop. Okay. Dale Clemens. Thank you, Mr. Clemens. Ella Dawson. And Ella's coming up, and Kim Olson. You're on standby.
Ella Dawson, Topeka. I'm a consumer, and my concern is personal and is concerned with the inflation. Have you thought about the $14, how that's going to affect us senior citizens who's on a fixed income? Everything else have gone up: food, medication, insurance. And we cannot afford that because our paychecks, our retirement checks have not gone up. And you're going to cause some people to go homeless because they cannot continue to afford the skyrocketing inflation prices that causing us to try to live and have a safe environment and enjoy life. And you need to look at the single parents with children, or either married parents with children with a limited income. And $14 to you all is like a drop of rain, but to us, that's a lot of money. What can $14 buy for us? Eggs are $3 and $4. Milk is $5 a gallon. Car insurance has gone up. If you own a home, house insurance gone up. Property taxes have gone up. I mean, not like $3 and $4, $6,000 and $7,000 for the same house that you lived in for 27, 28 years. So you need to consider, and sound like the stockholders are making money off of us when we cannot even afford to have a decent life. We can't even, some of us can't go to movies. We can't take our children to movies because the prices of movies have increased. So what kind of life are you setting for senior citizens who have given their whole entire life to the work environment? And we can't afford to be stockholders. If we could, I would get into it, buy me some of that stock and get that cash money. But do consider us. I oppose the rate increase, because what is the rate increase going to do for me? How is it going to help me? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dawson. Kim Olson, followed by Thomas Lloyd.
Hi, I'm Kim Olson, and I am a Topeka resident, and I am against the rate hike. I just have to, I say ditto to what the last lady was speaking about, because that's what I would say, is that I'm a senior citizen, and this last year with inflation, my water bill's gone up $6 with 12%. My gas has gone up $13, 17%. And then, of course, everybody's grocery, house payment, property taxes on go up. $14.25 for people on fixed incomes is quite a bit, and not even people that aren't fixed incomes, just working for people. I just feel like everyone should have access to affordable utilities. And I think it goes beyond quality of life, because I think there are seniors in their 80s and 90s, that age group, where paying their bills is going to be more important than turning on that air conditioner. And they won't do it, and their life is going to be threatened. I think people don't think about that, but I know with my dad's age group, he would totally do that. So I also know that there's assistance programs out there for people that have trouble paying their bills, but usually they're at the federal poverty guideline. And I am a retired social worker, and I've spent many years helping people fill these applications out. And there's going to be a whole group of people that just barely miss that guideline. They're going to be over the guideline, but they're still going to be poor and struggling. And they're not going to be able to qualify. And that really leaves them out. So I appreciate your time. And I would just say I would vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas Lloyd, are you in the room? Okay, we'll move on. Jim Long. Good. And followed by Elizabeth Renken. Go ahead, Mr.
I'm Jim
Long.
Long. I'm from Topeka. First of all, I want to thank the commission for being here and allowing us to speak. I think that the commission should look at salaries for Evergy. I estimate that a third to a half of their people earn over $90,000 a year, plus bonuses and perks. I think that's something you should take a close look at how those have increased over the years. Secondly, the Evergy rate is higher than Colorado, Iowa, Missouri, Texas, and Arkansas. Why do we need an increase? Thirdly, they made $854 million last year, and they gave 66% of it to their investors. Why can't they fund their electric operations with operating income? That's what businesses have to do. I think you should reduce their rates. To the average of the 5 states I just mentioned. I couldn't get Oklahoma because they don't advertise it and they don't put it on their website, just like Evergy. They have the worst website I've ever seen. You can't get any decent information from their website. Okay, I'm 80 years old, and so I'll reiterate what many of the older folks have said. I can't afford $14.24 a month. I live on Social Security and capers, and neither one of them have gone up as much as Evergy has in the last 20 years. I haven't had an increase in capers since I took it out in 2002. I have to take a job at 80 years old to pay my bills. I'm against the rate increase. Reduce it.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Elizabeth, are you in the room? Okay. Richard Johnson, followed by Dan Vanor. Mr. Johnson? Yes, very good.
My name is Richard Johnson. I'm from Silver Lake. Back in 2017 and 2018, we were warned about the runaway train. The runaway train is here now based on the fact that the rate hikes are starting to increase. I'm not an Evergy direct, but I am through Free State. I went up and protested against the rate hike there, which was $7. They're nonprofit, so no one can do anything, but the board makes a decision. At the end of the year, we're going to have another $3, so that's 10. And regardless of what you say, if Evergy has their prices increased, we're going to get hit again. It's a tag team situation. One of my arguments had to do with the fact that Kansas has 16% of the population is 65 and older. A lot of them are on fixed income. I'm not even mentioning the fact that we have a lot of disabled veterans. I've been to a lot of their homes because I delivered hospital beds, assist chairs, and so forth to them, and they're working even on a stricter budget. The other thing that you have to realize, and I realize it's not Evergy's full responsibility, but when you get old, things wear out. My bed sheets wore out. My lawnmower doesn't have parts for it anymore. You know, and fortunately I'm healthy, so I can take care of my house. But when you're looking at the fact that hits people that are 65 and over that can't paint their house, they can't change a utility, an appliance or anything like that, it's very significant. I am a part of Free State. There are 28 Free State or co-ops in the state of Kansas. Each one of those CEOs gets anywhere from $100,000 in salary up to over $1 million. I'm concerned about this thing with the unbridled control of solar farms and wind farms, because they're starting to realize they do affect weather patterns. They do affect these spotty storms that we're having right now. If you look at it, the United States created 225 gigawatts of electricity from solar farms. It takes 10 acres to make 1 megawatt. Do the math on how much that is. Those solar panels absorb heat. They're creating global warming, and they also affect the way that the weather is. And then we add solar or the wind farms to it. I'm from an area out here outside of town here, and I've tried to work with a lot of people on this. I was president of the group that stopped the ethanol plant from being put in here. And subsequently, it really concerned me because they got to looking, and I'm the guy that discovered the gas company was overcharging 700 customers for over 20 years on gas. And now we obviously had that problem again because the gas company got fined again in 2020, 2021, something like that. So we need to pay attention to that. And with the solar farms and the wind farms, we're just adding another layer on. When I went to the, I'll just tell you that we were told by Evergy and by Free State that it was their solar farms. That's what it was applied to, but it isn't. It's a different company. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Is Dan in the room? Dan? Dan, Dan. Okay. Ned Nussbaum? Are you in the room? Okay. Joan Donnelly. Be Joan Donnelly, followed by Catherine Ellsworth. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to speak. I'm speaking on the behalf of the little people, seniors, fixed income. I work part-time as well. If you had something to offer for this 14% increase, I would say fine, or the $14. But you don't have a program. I just learned something about the solar panels because I did invest in solar panels because I knew that there was going to be an increase. But we need to have programs that people can afford to utilize to make cheaper utility costs. And so I would refuse that you get an increase. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Catherine, and followed by Zach Pastora.
My name is Catherine Ellsworth. I'm a resident of Eudora, Kansas. I am a freelance writer working on some public policy papers that advocate for rural residents. So the Kansas mandate states that the Evergy is governed by a statute that says they need to provide reliable services at reasonable rates. I don't think it's reasonable to recoup the following costs from ratepayers. In the list, I read that they were decommissioned, there were 38 million for decommissioning wind facilities. I don't understand why they didn't have bonds in place. There's money to, they said they need to create infrastructure for the Panasonic growth. I don't know why there wasn't contingencies in place to know that this was forthcoming. They're already raising property taxes in the area. And there's all kinds of other expenses that residents are absorbing for that growth. They already get profit. They'll have additional profits from the Inflation Reduction Act. That will be a windfall that apparently could conceivably be financed by the Kansas ratepayers. They mentioned the Southwest Power Pool reserve margins growing 2%, but that's unsustainable as well, no pun intended. With the agreements with other regional transmission organizations, it's a bottomless pit. You'll be giving to Southwest Power Pool forever. Also, I think you said that the grid is not privately funded. I'm not sure that's true. I watched the proceedings on the Wolf Creek Blackberry transmission line, and Kansas is absorbing part of that cost. I think it's 14 or 17 million to create a transmission line to funnel energy outside to Southwest Power Pool. They said, well, electrons go both ways. Well, thanks for the physics lesson, but if it wasn't going out, it wouldn't need to come back in. So I think that Evergy can sustain plenty of profit margins for their shareholders without this rate increase. Thank you.
Thank you. Zach Pastora, followed by Joe Buchanan.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is Zach Pastora from Linwood, Kansas, a lifelong Evergy Central and Westar customer, which means Evergy is my one and only and favorite electrical service provider. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to speak before you tonight, but also for the hardworking and kind Evergy employees. I think that's worth mentioning for all the community service and charitable work and environmental achievements thus far. That said, I'm very disappointed in the proposed rate increase, which represents the largest rate increase for Evergy Central or Westar customers perhaps ever, but certainly in the last 15 years. $14 increase per month for me constitutes a 35% increase on my average $40 per month electric bill, and would nearly double the current base rate charge of $14.50 that I get assessed regardless of how much energy I use or not. And in fact, I worked really hard to cut my energy use, so the prospect of my bill going up seems backwards rate design wise. Evergy is asking to recoup $218 million with a higher return on equity that essentially nullifies the $232 million given back to customers per the merger savings. What bothers me most is that Evergy's rate request coincides with new plans to prolong its most expensive and polluting power, coal. Delaying coal plant retirements, as you know, adds greater fuel and maintenance costs to customers, and instead, Evergy should be strategically using securitization to reduce debt and fully transition to lower cost and cleaner fuel solutions, including energy efficiency, renewables, and storage. I didn't see the company modeled that in their last integrated resource plan. According to the EIA in 2021, Evergy burned about 10 million tons of coal, equating to 20 million tons of CO2. And imagine that's the equivalent of more than 12,000 hot air balloons of greenhouse gas pollutants floating into the atmosphere every day. KCC commissioners, Kansas deserve better than this. Please keep Evergy in check and consider impacts to public health and in the environment in these rate proceedings. The rate request is simply too high given the level of service we are provided. There are prudent costs to be recouped, like the renewable energy investments, the battery storage initiative and transmission spending and the like. But the high cost of coal and building of new gas plants doesn't offer Kansas the best bang for the buck long term. Shouldn't be rewarded by how much it spends, but by performance metrics like lowering the cost of the bills, saving Kansas energy, reducing the power outages and involuntary shutoffs, achieving more solar on rooftops, and generating more energy without pollution that negatively impacts Kansas. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pastor. Joe Buchanan, are you in the room? Okay. Tad Kramer, followed by Margaret Kramer. Very good. Good evening.
Good evening. I am Tad Kramer of Big Springs in western Douglas County. Kansans already pay significantly more for electricity than those in surrounding states of Nebraska, Missouri, and Oklahoma. Yet Evergy proposes to make this unfavorable situation even worse with a massive rate increase. The main reason our rates are higher is that Evergy wasted billions of dollars over the last decade investing in and retrofitting dirty coal plants. And those plants are now more expensive to operate than other cleaner energy sources. Evergy expects Kansas consumers to bear these costs. While Evergy posted record profits last year, paid higher dividends to shareholders, Kansas consumers will have to pay more so Evergy and its shareholders can continue to live high on the hog. This is obviously grossly unfair, and the KCC should reject it. Evergy and its shareholders, not consumers, should bear the cost of Evergy's bad business decisions. Instead of a rate increase, Evergy's executive salaries, profits, and shareholder dividends could decrease. Although Evergy is a public utility, it's not a welfare program for investors. If any, hopefully small rate increase is allowed, the KCC order should include requirements to cease production of dirty, expensive coal in the near future, substantially increase solar and wind energy, increase energy storage capacity to better utilize the wind and solar, and provide more information and incentives to consumers regarding the many things that they can do to reduce their energy consumption. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret Kramer, followed by Robert Hogan.
Hi, I'm Margaret Kramer, Big Springs, Kansas. Thank you very much for entertaining public comments. I wish that we were talking more about energy conservation than rate increases. A simple Google search reveals that since 1950, per capita energy usage has increased 82%, or almost doubled. I see no reason why things can't go the other way if we were all committed to trying to save energy. Well, like, here's an idea. What if you were to incentivize your customers and say, well, Joe Smith, Mary Clark, if you use fewer than so many kilowatts per month of energy, you don't have to pay this rate increase. Again, Joe Smith, Mary Clark, keep that energy usage down, be a good customer in terms of conserving. You don't have to pay the rate increase. So that would be my first point, just an idea, talking to the, addressing the people who are poor and elderly and all that kind of a thing where the $14 would really hurt them. That might be an option. They are probably living in a smaller house. They're probably not using a lot of energy. Might consider giving them a break. Second point is to consider educating your consumers more about energy savings. I mean, we always see the stock article about re-insulate your home, get an energy audit, and caulk your windows. And that's fine. That's great. That's totally great. But there are so many lists of like 200 things you can do to reduce your energy consumption. I remember washing dishes by hand. I remember hanging clothes on the line. I mean, there are a million things people can do. And you can say, oh, no, we don't do it that any way anymore. Why not? Would a lightning bolt strike us if we did? I mean, in order to combat global warming, we have got to get to a point where we are all concerned about it and we are all using less. You know, some people are upset about coal, some people are upset about wind, some people are upset about solar. We all could breathe a lot easier, not have to be as upset at all. We wouldn't even have to be here asking for the rate increase if we all conserve more energy. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Hogan, followed by Curtis Brown.
Yes, thank you.
Please.
I commented earlier about the situation that I'm in the moving of Evergy lines, and that they're taking my land by eminent domain. And I would like the commission to try to get the legislature to make that money non-taxable. I'm not wanting to sell that land or give it to Evergy. They make one payment now, and they got use of that forever. I've had this land for 50 years. There's a line that runs across the corner. They're going to move the line and I maybe make it higher voltage. I commented at the eminent domain hearing about the EMF that comes off those lines, and I got keyhawed off by the people that were representing Evergy in the process. They commented like, there's no, you know, that's just newspaper articles, don't mean anything. So a little upset about this, but the fact that I end up having to pay tax on money that they're paying me, it is a more irritating. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Curtis Brown, are you in the room? Good. Followed by Steve Pantas.
Hi, I'm Curtis Brown, Topeka, Kansas. First off, I want to say this. I'm a disabled veteran. I'm retired Kansas Army National Guard, work for the VA, and I live on a fixed income. Period. This $14 is going to be enough. I have a family member that's also disabled. That $14 is half of one of her medications. She has MS and she can't work. I can't work either. And yet I'm required to be at my house and use my income and pay for electricity as well. So the whole idea of hourly rates and everything else drives me up the wall with a smart meter. But we need to reject this rate hike that Evergy is asking for. We already know that the additional costs are going to directly impact low income, retired, and disabled individuals like myself. Others that are not as blessed as I am in my situation, by becoming a disabled veteran, are very likely to face housing insecurity at a time where we're already dealing with inflation and additional costs. We've heard Evergy blame Kansas's growing population for being a burden to them because they can't sell the energy. They can't sell the surplus energy because Kansans are buying it, but they want more. We already have seen this with some of their salary increases. Last year, just a quick look, Dave Campbell, CEO, 6.89 million is what he made. That's significant for Kansas. It's significant if you lived in Colorado. We just kind of go through this. We have seen the legislature work to provide relief to Kansans by beginning to attempt to remove our food sales tax. Attempt. We're only halfway there, yet Evergy wants more of that than we are getting back from our food. Sounds like they just want our money that way without doing anything else. But we've also seen that they continue to hide their requests for the increase throughout everything. you can't find what they really want. And this, I know, is one of the things that is going to impact other Kansans. Is it is going to hurt small businesses. Because as customers spend more at Evergy, we can't go to the Pennant downtown to go axe throw it. I can't. I don't get to go out. Not anymore. Y'all get my money already. And if you don't get it, the state gets it in my property, or the county gets it in my property tax. We're tired. We need to not allow this to continue to happen and really look at what they're spending their money on. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Christine Wedeking, John Deal. Good. Followed by Representative Carrie Barth.
Good evening. Just a couple of comments. I'll lead off by saying I am against the rate increase as well, at least as stated. I think that 10% is excessive, given what they're actually doing, and I find it actually extremely slimy, given that the one of the major bases for the proposed, well, for the accepted merger of Westar and KCP&L was cost savings. I'm sorry, $5 back does not counterbalance at all a $15 a month increase to my electricity bill. Also, I think it would be worth bearing in mind that the base rate for what is being charged for electricity may not have gone up, but Evergy has managed to increase costs in other ways. Just look at the number of line items that keep getting added to your electricity bill if you doubt me. So they are already recouping their costs in that way. Also, there was a point about trying to increase service, and well, in fact, in my opinion, service has decreased. This may make me somewhat of a Luddite, but I really liked being able to call and actually talk to a person when I had an energy outage. Now I can't get any information about squat. And in the couple of times that I have had an energy outage since the electronic service has gone up, well, it's been wrong every single time. So with all of that in mind, I find the proposed rate increase just not a very good idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Representative Carrie Barth, followed by Harrison Dahl.
Hello, commissioners and Evergy and Herb. I'm Representative Carrie Barth, and I represent the District 5 for the Kansas House. And I'm here to speak in opposition to the rate increase. I actually have a lot of ideas for Evergy on the benefit side, what I do for professional living, so we can talk about that at a later point in time. I get a lot of people that reach out to me in my district, across the state, other states, even other countries now. As I have delved into the energy world, I was even speaking on FERC last night at a meeting and on all things energy. And as a state legislator, we have access to a research team. And so I asked some questions. So one of those was, how much did rates increase in Kansas with Westar for the 10 years prior to the merger with KCP&L? And for the period 2007 to 2017, the electrical rates increased approximately 55% over that 10-year period, according to the data that they provided from the Energy Information Administration. My other question is, how much have rates increased in Kansas since the merger to Evergy, and what is the time frame? So the merger required Evergy to place a moratorium on seeking a rate increase through the rate setting process, which is interesting because also according to the EIA, between 2018 and 2022, which is a 4-year period, the average electric rates for the sectors, residential, commercial, and industrial, have increased about 9%. So we're coming off of this, rate increase ICU coma. and being hit with more increases on top of some more increases. We also, I think people will find interesting, we passed a bill in the House, and then also it was HB 2225. It was addressing transmission delivery charges and some things. And it was, Evergy was the only one in opposition to this bill, and it was to decrease our rates by 4 cents per ratepayer. The interesting thing is the day that the governor signed it into law, that Evergy filed for the rate increases that we're here for today. I also listened to the rate earnings, quarterly earnings for Q1 for 2023 with for Evergy, the CEO, David, talked about rate increase earnings to increase your equity ratio for your shareholders. He mentioned the modernization with a focus on cost savings, which I'm wondering then why are we receiving a rate increase? He said that they were successful with cost savings. I'm assuming that was the 60% payout to the shareholders that they gave. They kept addressing the safe, reliable, affordable sustainability as being the main topic. And I'm just curious as to what is sustainable about a rate increase that we're receiving. So I'm in opposition, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Right now, we'll turn to a Zoom participant.
Yes, Elizabeth Dillon, Miss Dillon.
Oh, thank you. So thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, especially to join over Zoom. I too, like pretty much everyone here, save a few of the presenters, am opposed to the proposed rate increase. I understand Evergy's commitment to shareholders, but this should not be a money-making operation at the cost of thousands of Kansans that have basically no other option. Evergy has a government-mandated throttle on this industry for understandable infrastructure reasons, and that infrastructure is definitely not cheap to maintain, but they can and very much should be operating under slimmer profit margins. 60% is ridiculous for something that they have a throttle on the market for. It's your job to protect us, fixed income retirees, disabled Kansans, indebted Kansans, young families, and all Kansas residents already struggling with rising inflation costs. Don't let them increase rates and force the people you're beholden to go hungry or homeless for the sake of their bonuses and shareholders. That's all I have to say. But thank you for listening, and I hope you take the consideration of everyone here tonight to heart.
Thank you, Ms. Dillon. We'll move on to Harrison Dahl. Very good. Followed by Jonathan Smith.
Good evening. As you can tell, I have not been a customer of Evergy for long, but it is my desire to stay in Kansas my whole life. It is my desire to raise a family. It's my desire to own a business. My problem with this rate increase is it is simply a symptom of a bigger issue. It seems that if this rate increase is approved, what is stopping more rate increases from being approved? That is a big issue. Tonight, I heard a presenter talk about the natural monopoly of Evergy, and I kind of call that into question for a few reasons. One is they talk about the cost to do all the infrastructure that it takes to be a player in this space. Then why are ratepayers paying for that very cost? That makes little sense to me. Also, calling it a natural monopoly seems kind of contradicting for the fact of how much they spend on lobbying and swaying legislation. For it to be a natural monopoly, that kind of signals to me that happens on its own. But if a company is really trying to assert so much pressure on the system, then it calls to question if the system needs to change. Possibly even if this body needs to be electable rather than just appointed. As bad as this rate increase is, I'm worried about the future. I'm worried about the future of the state and what is going to happen if we keep allowing these rate increases. I am worried that businesses and families are not going to come to the state. Right now, it shows that many families are leaving this state. If you look at certain streets in Missouri on the border of Kansas and Missouri, on one side, you have a massive rate increase on the Kansas side. What stops people from leaving? I love this state. Born in this state, lived here my whole life, and I do not want this state to be a place people are leaving. Instead, I want it to be a place that people come. So I am begging you today to really reconsider how this is done, so rate increases don't increase. And not only that, but more families and businesses will come to this great state I have grown to love. Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan Smith. Danielle Twemlow. There you are. Okay. Very good.
Thank you, Danielle Twemlow, Topeka, Kansas, and have been paying for many years. I guess I really feel like I should have prepared because I have so many things that I want to say, and I should have probably written this out, because as we're going along and I'm hearing about we need to educate more and we need to provide these resources to families, I think it's really important that we put into perspective of what that looks like. Here in Shawnee County, for an adult with 2 children, what has been deemed a livable wage is $41.20, meaning that that is the cost that a person needs to make an hour in order to provide for their family without being cost burdened. $41.20, which I know very little people who make that. And we know that in this time frame that minimum wage hasn't increased at all. I do, however, see that you did put on this paper here all the additional costs, including that gas price cost, which is the reason we already have the $2.82 added on to our overlapping bill. So there will be at least a year overlapping with those increases. So while we all also have that increase in our gas, we don't have anyone that we can offset that to, unfortunately. However, Evergy, who is offsetting that cost to us, has had a 16.41% profit margin year over year. So while we haven't had a minimum wage increase, and while our living wage is unattainable for a majority of our citizens, Evergy is profiting. Additionally, I think it's really important to know that many people don't really realize what cost burden in housing means. So for housing to be affordable or not cost burden, that includes mortgage and rent, but it also includes utilities, right? So that's a part of that conversation about affordable housing. And really, for it to be affordable, it needs to be no more than 30% of somebody's income. Currently, we have more people who are paying mortgage in our county who are paying more than 30% into their housing at 22.3% of our community. For renters in our community, that number is 46.2% of our current citizens are cost burdened in housing, which includes that utility rate. I really like to tell a brief story. I don't have much time. So when I'm talking about the, educating people on being cost efficient on their utilities, I do serve families who don't have a lot of resources. And I will tell you that it is not often their reasoning for not doing low electricity, or who are turning their air conditioner up super, super low and they're heating up really high. It's because we have landlords and we have laws that protect landlords who are not caulking those windows, who are not providing energy efficient homes that are safe. So our recent housing study did state that over 33% of citizens in Topeka cannot afford a 2-bedroom safe unit to live in. This is a cost burden, and I oppose.
Thank you. Kate Hamilton. Very good, followed by Kathleen Harned.
Thank you, Commissioner Duffy, and commissioners for being here and the work you do. It cannot be easy to balance all of the needs and interests represented here tonight. I would like to urge you to seriously consider two things. I'm here as a consumer, so I am concerned about burden and fairness of the rate. But I'm here as a mother and grandmother of Kansans who are Evergy users. So I'm concerned with the future. I'm afraid we're all so short-sighted. It's all about my interest this year, our profits this year, how we do this year. And I'm very worried about the future of our state. Like that young man, I want it to be glorious. I want it to be something we're all proud of, how wise we are, how smart we are about what we do with our resources. I would urge you, as you consider rates, whether it's for electricity or water or any of our resources, that you think about what the Supreme Court said about who must be considered when you're trying to come up with a just, fair rate. Not only our current ratepayers, but our future ratepayers, which is really the future of Kansas. Everybody, we're all going to be doing it. Please consider what's been said tonight about any rate should have built into it incentives to reduce the use of energy, to reduce our use of water, to reduce the use of our very limited resources. And any rate you build needs to consider the future, whether it's investments and alternatives to coal, which doesn't just cost us. I mean, yes, right now, short-sighted, we got to do it. We got to do it. But what is it costing us in respiratory illness? What is it costing us in pollution? And it's not a solution for Kansas 20, 30 years from now. We have got to invest in solutions that really work, not just for our generation or our children's generation, but for our grandchildren and beyond. So please hold our feet to the fire. Make us think about the future, because we're not going to do it unless you make us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, looking here, Kathleen Harned.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kathleen Harned from Lawrence, Kansas. You know, if Evergy's cost of doing business has risen, and that is necessitates the raise in rates, it's very logical to just find, for one thing at least, to find ways to cut costs. Everyone knows that in a home and a business. A good place to begin for Evergy would be if they would stick to their recent IRP and close the Lawrence Energy Center coal plant. This was a promise that they have now reneged on. They have pushed the time out to 2028, and it has to make us wonder if they're going to push it to 2030, 2032. I understand that you have many excuses for why the coal production needs to continue, but I also understand that in my many years of professional life, excuses were never tolerated. And you guys certainly seem to do a good job at making excuses. So I don't think that it makes a lot of sense to reward Evergy for reneging on that promise. Everyone's taking it so lightly. I mean, this was an IRP, and you stated that the Lawrence Energy Center coal aspect would be closed down in 2023. So I don't understand why we are rewarding, or why Evergy has the nerve to ask for a reward for reneging. You know, In the past, I know that Evergy has complained about the fact that there just is not a solution for renewable energy storage. You know, Lawrence Energy Center would be a great renewable energy storage plant. Wonderful way to use that, and the transmission lines are already there. I know you're probably laughing, thinking, oh, I just don't know what I'm talking about, but I just don't get the feeling that you've really put much time and energy into really holding on to that promise of closing the coal plant. Thank you.
Thank you. Ronald Ray.
My name is Ronald Ray, R-A-Y. I live in Maple Hill, Kansas, but I'm not a fifth generation Kansan. Just for fair disclosure. So I have some concerns about the rate increase. Some of them are on the level of what's motivating it. I think, to me, looking at this, because there's not much detail being given by Westar, I don't think they've sufficiently justified it. So just in case I run out of time, I'm against the rate increase. But to me, it looks like they're more engaging in politics. And what I mean is that their choices here are geared more towards putting into practice the cultural communism of the Green New Deal, which is being foisted on us by the New World Order, by groups like the Bilderbergers, and the ESG social credit scheme, which is designed to basically eliminate, impoverishes people, and enriches the plutocrats. Okay. And so, because they're making choices to emphasize so-called renewable energy, but it's not as efficient. Personally, I have no problem with the coal plants. They're 98 to 99% clean. And as anybody who's taken the 5th grade science knows, that carbon dioxide gets converted into oxygen by plants, just through their process. So I think that it's some of their business choices, which are more political than actually for the benefit of the citizens. Okay, they're a public utility. If you're giving 2/3 of your profit, of your net profit, to the shareholders, you're not benefiting Kansans. Okay, take some of that profit, put it back into the business, and keep the rates low. The other thing is that, for example, they've made the commitment to shut down the Jeffries coal plant. That will destroy the tax base of Potawatomi County. And it'll cause either collapse of county services or a massive increase in property taxes, or both. Okay, so there are a lot of hidden costs here because of their bad choices. They haven't offered an alternative. There's some talk of nuclear, but that's got its own environmental risks. So I think that this needs to be rethought seriously, because that $14 a month, and that's an average, so it means in practice it's going to be much higher for most people. That represents over 10% of the salary increase I got this year. I'm 60 years old. If I'm lucky, I'll get to retire at 72. I might have to work until I'm 80. Okay, so it is significant, and I think that it needs to be denied.
Thank you. Okay, I'm looking around the room. Is there anyone else here who would like to come forward? I'm going to pause here and let you think about it. Okay, while you're thinking about it, we have somebody on Zoom who would like to appear. Oh.
Amir, welcome back. So.
Hi again. I just have a question to consider for the commission, for the staff, and for Curb. It's been noted multiple times, and I've actually mentioned it myself. The lack of a transparency, the lack of true justification is a serious concern when a corporation, that's exactly what this is, is wanting to dig into somebody's pocket, fixed income pocket, working two jobs pocket, or somebody like me who is working one job on bankruptcy and quite literally eating Vienna sausages and ramen noodles almost every single day just to make ends meet on utilities. So yeah, it is a severe lack of transparency on Evergy's part to explain why these increases are needed, if at all, except to line the pockets of the investors.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you very much.
All
I need to
right,
walk.
folks, is there anybody else in the room who would like to speak? Yes. If you'll state your name and.
I'm Diana Swafford and I'm from Topeka. I would just like to say that and reiterate that when people are on fixed incomes, $14 is a lot of money. I used to work at Walmart Pharmacy and I saw people come in with pennies and count them out to pay for their meds, or they didn't have the money for their meds. So they just walked out and they needed meds like they were walking out on to sustain their life and they couldn't afford them. So, you know, it's either people can afford like food or utilities or whatever, and not their meds. I saw that plenty of times. My mother made $1,000 Social Security. That was it. That's all she had a month to live on. And she had her house insurance, her car insurance, groceries, utilities. Figure it out. It's not much. And I'd also like to say, I think corporate people get paid way too much money and they make bad decisions. I worked for Jostens for 40 years. And we had people up in the big plants that made bad decisions for us. And so I know that they do it. And I worked at Walmart. They made bad decisions too. So I would just like to say that I think the rate increase should not happen.
Thank you. All right. All right, last call. Anyone else? Oh, back there? Yes, please. If you'll come forward and tell us who you are and where you're from. I know it's not easy to speak in front of a group, so.
Yes, I'm Lavonna Speakman from Topeka, Kansas. I just wanted to say that I'm opposed to the price hike, especially when the investors are getting such a huge profit. You know, the higher ups in the company, you know, I'm sure they get regular pay raises. There's lots of companies that have actually cut back some on wages, but that has not been, nothing has been said about that. And also it's unfair for the price hike that you want to charge for central Kansas compared to the Kansas City area, when they are also going to be getting some of the perks from what they want to charge us is solely for. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Again, last call. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else that would like to come forward. I would like to remind everyone that the public comment period is open till September 29th at 5 p.m. The materials handed out this evening outline 3 ways in which comments can be submitted. You picked those up when you walked in, and it's right in the middle on the left-hand side, the 3 different ways that you can submit comments to the KCC for our consideration. In terms of next steps, the commission will hold another public hearing this Thursday at the Best Conference Center on the KU Edwards campus in Overland Park. Our final public hearing will be held in Wichita on Thursday, July 27th. I think I said June. I meant to say July 27th at the Low Auditorium at Wichita State University Hughes Metropolitan Complex. And both hearings will begin at 6 p.m. The evidentiary hearing in this matter will begin at 9 a.m. on October 9th at the commission offices in Topeka. The hearing will also be broadcast on the KCC's YouTube channel, so you can tune in and watch it there. The commission will issue a decision in this matter. We must issue a decision in this matter on or before January 4th, 2024. Okay, I'm looking around. Staff, anything? All right. This concludes the public hearing. We thank you for your attendance. Your comments are very important to us, and everyone be safe traveling home. Thank you very much.